And we are live.
All right, welcome to the Camera Show, where we talk about all things cameras, film, and video. I'm Rowan Bradley, and with me is.
Mike Morris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's a hot day in Portland, but I'm glad to see the sun out. Been working on some projects, so I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, same. I'm glad to see the sun out, and I'm glad to have a basement. Because it's getting
That,
hot, like real hot.
yeah, that is something I need to be working on. Is somewhere to work when it's going to be 90 degrees out.
Yep.
Well, let's jump into it, man. There hasn't been much news in the camera world lately, but we've got a couple little tidbits here. I think in all the Canon R5 hype, something that has been lost for a lot of people at least is that there's also another camera supposedly coming out called the R6, which actually looks like a camera I would be more inclined to purchase. Have you checked out the specs on the rumored specs for the R6?
Yeah, I did actually. Same. I'm very curious to see first what the R5 is gonna be, because I I have a feeling that it's a camera I'm gonna want, but I have a feeling that it's also not a camera I'm gonna be able to afford, and so the R6 seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of an enticing option for me for both of those reasons. And also because when you look at the specs, just to run down those really quickly, it's rumored to be a 20 megapixel full frame camera, CMOS sensor, IBIS, oversampled 5K video, 10-bit, zebras, and no RAW, but you've got dual SD slots. You've got there's a couple autofocus things like head detection AF.
Yeah,
So that
animal
sounds like you
detection for your cats.
it sounds like you might not
Yeah.
get eye detection, but you would get some detection. Um,
No, totally. And I mean, honestly, like, Canon autofocus just works. And I'm not too concerned about that. Like, I would be more skeptical about what the 10 bit is going to be and the C log, because if it's C log 1, I feel like it's almost a CND like -3 on saturation kind of thing. It's barely just a desaturated standard profile C-Log 1. So I would hope to be at least C-Log 3 on it, to compete with Vlog on Panasonics and other. I'm not too familiar with the Fuji one. You had the X-T3. How was that compared to the Panasonic Vlog or Vlog L?
I would say that it was F-Log is comparable in what you can do with it. However, in like a technical capacity, I did find it a little bit more challenging to grade, just from getting it to look like how you wanted it to look like. I had to lean pretty hard on the Eterna profile that they do provide. So in that,
Yeah.
if you want it to look like Eterna, that's good. But I had a hard time grading it outside of Eterna versus the Panasonic or the Blackmagic, which I found both really easy to grade, even if you're just shooting in log without using their built-in profiles. I've found those super easy to use. So it was good, but maybe a little more challenging than the others.
Yeah.
But on the R6, I feel like the main thing for me is 10-bit in combination with oversampled 5K video, which I feel like is the sweet spot. Like 5K gives you a little bit of punch-in capability if you need to punch in for delivering in 4K or producing in 4K.
Yeah.
But you get the sharpness of something that's a higher resolution, and 10-bit, which is hopefully just becoming a much broader standard for consumer-grade cameras these days in video
Yeah.
format.
Cool.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that, of course. The other thing, and this is sort of tangentially related to camera stuff, is that Apple has moved their Mac lineup to their own silicon. Did you follow any news from
I
WWDC?
didn't. No, I didn't. Very curious to know what it was
Yeah,
about.
So Apple has been producing their own silicon based on the ARM format for a long time. ARM is a different architecture than x86, which is Intel as well as AMD architecture in your PCs. And ARM is what powers smartphones. And so within 2 years, it sounds like all Macs are going to be moved over to ARM architecture
Okay.
with chips created by Apple. And so, at least right now, that looks like the kind of experience you'd have on the iPad Pro. So, very good performance. They're designing, of course, those chips for very constrained thermal environments, like a phone or an iPad, versus something that has in a laptop, a little bit more thermal headroom, or in a desktop, a lot more thermal headroom, like the Mac Pro or the iMac, where we don't even really know what these chips would look like in that kind of environment. But based on Apple's track record of being able to jump ahead much more quickly than Intel in their performance gains year over year, could be really exciting. I think right now we're kind of seeing this. We'll see a transition period, and how this. I mean, in the demo they did show Lightroom and Photoshop performance of emulated software, so it's being kind of emulated on the fly, and it looked usable. They didn't do anything too particularly hard. They weren't video editing. Of course, Final Cut Pro 10 is supported natively on the new hardware, but things like Premiere and Resolve would have to be repackaged to be compiled directly for the ARM architecture.
Yeah, I saw just the headline in an article about something Apple related, and a promise that you could be able to play 3 4K timelines into Final Cut Pro. But so I'm wondering if it's coming from the same news. I think it was in No Film School, but because I never use Final Cut Pro, I just didn't watch I didn't read the article.
Yeah, I think for Final Cut Pro users, the transition will probably happen really without them noticing. And for a lot of consumers, it will be. I'm very curious about, of course, the kinds of performance gains, hopefully, that we would see, as well as how quickly the software makers could get things over. I mean, I purchased a 16-inch MacBook Pro back in November of last year, and it'll have to do for a while. But I see the kind of the Pro lineup taking probably at the end of that 2-year cycle. And so, if I get a good 2 years out of this machine, and then hopefully they'll have worked out some of the kinks in both hardware and in software. And especially when it comes to third-party developers, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get apps ready for the new architecture.
Yep. Cool. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, interesting news in the computer world. So, Mike, for our topic today, we've got inspiration, and this is a word that I kind of hate and love in some ways, but I think it's good to talk about what we've seen, what work has influenced us, and of course everybody, to kind of like have a grounding in why we get interested in this. Because I think for a lot of us, when we start down a creative venture, there's like one particular thing that we see, and it kind of, or maybe a combination of things that we see that open up our minds to saying, oh, that's what I want to do.
Yep.
But then we get kind of in our own heads, and we actually start making the thing, and then we start comparing ourselves to other people, and then you go down the rabbit hole of all the stuff that everybody else has created, and you can kind of lose sight of where things started from. And so I thought for today's episode, it'd be kind of fun to go back and take a look at kind of things that got us started and got us interested in producing things for the web and producing video content in general. And take a look at those, and then also take a look at what is motivating us these days.
I love it. And yeah, when you suggested this topic, I didn't really realize but it's exactly what you just said, and digging into it and trying to really narrow down what are the pieces that really made me want to do this also reminded me that like these particular things that I wanted to do and that I might have kind of forget down the road.
Do you want to start us off with what got you interested in video stuff, or
Sure.
should I go first?
No, I can go first. The year was 1984. I'm gonna make this joke every time.
Yeah.
Well, outside of the obvious, I was definitely brainwashed by Hollywood blockbusters from the 80s, 90s, even 70s a little bit. Definitely. But although it was very inspiring, I think it wasn't like directly calling me for doing the same thing. Not directly. So I went a little bit back and forth with video and filmmaking in my life. I started probably around teenage years. I got a camcorder and was filming my friends. I think I mentioned that in the first episode. I was filming my friends like skateboarding and rollerblading and things like that. So it was this need for like documenting the stories that are not necessarily told, and I was definitely inspired by all the DVDs of people doing skateboardings and things like that. So I don't even have the names of these people. I'm sure a lot of them are still working. I don't have any coming to my mind, or even like doing the research, I couldn't find a single one to highlight today. But then I dropped it a little bit. I fall more into photography, and later around I was probably around 25 or something like that. So around maybe about a little bit more than 10 years ago, I got back into it, and that's definitely watching. It was, I don't know here, and I think it was the same thing here. Web series were kind of big, became kind of big for a minute. Homemade web series with good stories and things like that. And in France, French YouTube, we had a lot of emerging new talents that would create content like that. So narrative series or short films, little documentaries. And so I linked one in the Google Doc that was called Le Visiteur du Futur, which means the time traveler. And it was kind of a comedy sci-fi. It was really good. And it started really cheap, and they slowly got better at it after seasons. And the last season, the fourth one, was actually produced by for TV. So it was actually looking decent, and that really got me me and my friends being yeah, this is what we want to do. And then that's how we started to make little short films, because they would make you feel like there were no shame of doing something, even if it looks amateur and cheap. And they were relatable. They were your age, group of friends, nerds. And yeah, if one of us has a camera, he's the filmmaker, and that was me.
Yes.
As simple as that. But yeah, I would say before that, definitely I had a huge. And I had this. I totally forgot, but I had a screenshot of the Time Traveler. So that was from the last season with a lot of VFX and things like that. But yeah, anyway, link will be in the description, and I think actually it's subtitled. So if you have nothing to watch, it's kind of fun.
I mean, I love web series. I think the format of these kind of for me, it was Star Wars fan films. That's what I made. So I was
Nice.
super Star Wars nerd, and so me and a bunch of other nerdy friends would go out and we'd dress up like Jedis and whack each other with carbon fiber lightsabers that we made in my friend's tool shop, and make these little fan films. I think we even submitted one to a Star Wars fan film festival. So it kind of right when, it was camcorder era, right?
Oh yeah.
When camcorders were kind of the way to produce video. I love doing that stuff. We've made Jurassic Park 3 before Jurassic Park 3 came out.
It was probably better than the actual Jurassic Park 3.
It wasn't worse.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, totally. Yeah, in France we had a lot of different. Some were dramatic, really old genre, dramatic, comedy, or theater, like all style, and some were better produced than others. And some people were really talented, and they actually ended up being like writers, or I mean, screenwriters, or directors, or they work. They still work in the industry. So yeah, that definitely got me into it. And at the time, actually, the fun fact about that is I ended up opening my photo studio because of it, because I couldn't justify to afford more gear, and I was like, unless it's my job, and I was not confident enough to open a video production, even to make like the smallest jobs, but I was skilled enough to do photo studio. And it was at the era of the 5D Mark II, and I was like, I could get a 5D Mark II, shoots HD videos, 24p. I'm gonna make movies in the theater with my friends, and
Yeah.
that's totally how I got into it. I mean, more seriously, my foot at the
Yeah.
door was definitely that. I opened my studio, and then it's kind of funny because I became tagged more as a photographer, where really the whole deal for me was filmmaking. So yeah, there were that. I don't know, do you want to jump with one of yours and maybe we go back and forth like that?
Sure. Yeah. So I limited myself to YouTube recommendations because I'm really trying to focus on YouTube right now with my own creation, and I definitely have a lot of like films and music, and I got an English degree, so certainly books and literature has also been a huge influence on just like on me, and then therefore what I am creating. But for YouTube specifically, and kind of taking that seriously as a platform to invest in, I remember back in like 2014, 2013, DigitalRev, and probably before that, DigitalRev hosted by Kai Wong, who's kind of like he's got his own channel and audience now. But I remember watching the, like professional photographer with toy camera videos, and I always loved that he had a soft spot for film cameras, so that kind of coincided with my love for film photography and for rangefinders, Leica cameras. That was kind of right in line with what I was doing at the time. And the other really cool thing I thought that demonstrated was, and this is so common sense now, but it was a pioneer in creating like video content for a niche audience. Obviously, photography has exploded as like a hobby and like a thing that people are doing just in their daily lives so much more. But when it started, at least, it was more of a niche kind of thing. It was something that you did as a hobby, and most people didn't just do all the time. At least they had to take some amount of particular interest to incorporate photography, and it created an audience and a channel around that, and I think it was actually pretty one of the first to realize that YouTube could be a part of driving like a business. I mean, of course, there was like a camera business attached to it, but they were early to figuring that out. And I just think that's such a cool example of why don't we just go and shoot these videos? And I know that, from listening to interviews and whatnot, that Kai and Locke kind of just picked this up as a side project. Same thing with what's now DP Review TV. It was the Camera Store TV back then. It was kind of two people who worked at a camera store saying, hey, let's just go shoot a video about this and put it on the internet. And kind of like just what you were saying with the web series, so much of it is just messing around with the format itself and your interests and seeing what comes of it. And I just like that as a kind of like that first impulses to create something.
I think there were a certain level of comfort also knowing that people going on YouTube were not necessarily everybody. I mean, sure, everybody was hosting their video on YouTube, but really, like browsing YouTube the way we do it now was not that common at the time. At least not in France, but I'm sure it was the same thing here. Where it was more like I mean, you were more nerdy and for going like spending times on YouTube. So there were a level of comfort because you knew that you would not necessarily be judged the same way that you would be now. Eventually, if you get comment and views or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And your point is a good one where it was like, back in those days, YouTube was kind of a way to host video. It wasn't a social network and a whole platform in its own right. Of course, that's kind of morphed and changed over the years, but at the time, hosting video itself was a big challenge. You might have to, like, if you wanted to do it yourself, you'd have to like rent server space or like get a server potentially and host it on your own or build a back end for I mean, it was a technical and challenging process. Now you just hit upload and it's taken care of for you.
Yeah, and people starting YouTube channels often already have this idea of getting views and an audience, and they already have like a fair idea of who's gonna watch. I mean, everything is more calculated than it used to be. Where like before it was really like you target your niche and you didn't really expect going outside of this niche. So Sam, I was a big fan of DigitalRev. Pretty early on, I couldn't understand much, but I loved it.
Yeah. What's next on your list?
Well, it's actually the first one, but I forgot it, so I'm gonna circle back to that. But a huge inspiration that I got pretty early on, and I was definitely, around like teenager. One thing that was very big in France was narrative music videos. And what I'm talking about narrative is like you barely see the artist, the musicians. It's more like a short film where the music is overlay and you have like a little bit of a story. So I linked Daft Punk from Daft Punk, which was directed by Spike Jonze, if I'm saying his name correct. And that's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's a director listening to the music and thinking, what this music is inspiring me, and pulling a story around that, making a short film, and eventually you have the apparition, like as a cameo. You have the musician in there, but they are not the center of the video. And I thought it was so interesting. I remember at the time it blew my mind. There were like some very creative pieces made at this time. So I could list more. Eventually I'll link some more in the Google Doc if some people wants to get lost in there. And I kind of missed that. I was trying to research a little bit as today in the music, and everything is pretty much, I mean, for the most part, is centered around the artist, and I just don't see the creative value, the added value of the video. If it's just to watch the artist singing it or performing it and listening to your music, I rather listening to Spotify. I don't see the point of watching the music video. I
think it's interesting. I think the 90s were kind of the peak of this kind of narrative, basically a short film as a music video that is maybe theme-wise inspired by the music, but not narrative-wise inspired by the music necessarily, or inspired but not directly playing out what's in the music, or the artist performing it, of course. And I think what we've seen in music videos is production values go way, way up, but also the need for music videos to serve as kind of like a conduit. It's like, if you think about it in a marketing funnel, it's like how to get them to like follow the artist and buy their merch or subscribe to them or follow them elsewhere or something like that, or of course to see them in person. It kind of serves a function a lot more, and so I think that makes it kind of mandatory for the artist to be performing on camera versus this kind of like artistic thing that, you know, probably on MTV or something like that, where being out there and creative and a little bit different was the best way to get noticed, and it didn't necessarily be your face. So I think the kind of like underpinnings of the music industry have kind of changed that, but I do think there's creativity lost in that for sure, where certainly we're not seeing like big name directors. They are directing music videos for sure, but you don't see so much of their style or a story that they want to tell. It's just a very nice looking music video with the artist and like cool set pieces and nice lighting usually.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because in the meantime, back in the day, for the most part, you had no idea of who was making the video or the short film, whatever you want to call it, where it was more artistic and more involved, and you had no idea who was making it. And now every music video is credited, and it's not that creative anymore. And even when it is, I feel like it's very commercial centered. It's almost like I don't know, like it's almost like a perfume commercial with the artist, where it's just pulling the light the best possible on the artist, and even if it's creative by whatever it's doing, and don't get me wrong, I still love a lot of music videos from now. It's just that I miss that style, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Of making a little short film, like when you see stuff like from Billy Elliot, or like, I mean, that's amazing even from a filmmaking standpoint, but it's still very centered on the person, and it's not like a little short story.
Is it,
you know,
Billie Eilish?
Yeah. I don't know.
Billy Elliot, the movie from the 90s. No.
Oh boy.
I just wanted to catch that.
Yeah, thank you.
No. I totally agree. I think they're, you know, very well produced, but they don't have that extra element of creativity that I think there used to be room for that, and I think there's a lot less room for that these days in what a music video needs to function as for an artist.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely not Billy Elliot. Fucking idiot.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is, and it's about dance too. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? What's the next one?
So I feel like I kind of have a lineage of things going on here, where the next one I have is Ben Brown, who's a YouTuber from the UK. He's not active so much anymore, but he was kind of coming up during the Casey Neistat heyday. And I didn't include Casey Neistat because, of course, Casey Neistat is an inspiration.
Same. Yep.
I wanted to pick something. Yeah, everybody is, you know, I've not heard one person, you know, who takes YouTube seriously not say Casey Neistat is just this massively influential person on the platform. But Ben Brown was kind of more in the travel adventure side of things, and what I really liked about him is that he kind of just started as he was a professional kayaker or canoeer, rower. He was a professional rower, competitive rower. And at first his vlogs just kind of started out like, yeah, I do this thing intensely, and you know, other rowers will be interested in that. But then he started traveling around the world and in mostly competitive rowing, and that fueled this whole other world of like, you know, travel content. And what I thought that he brought to it that was really unique was that he would make he had this series called Visual Vibes. And I like how he kind of created this. He would have his vlogs, and then he would have these like more cinematic pieces that kind of functioned on their own, but they were often related to the more daily content. And so while you were watching him, you were basically watching this documentary of a movie being made while the movie was like, it was the documentary of the movie and the movie being made at the same time. And with vlogs not really being in vogue so much these days, I don't know if that kind of disappears, but I feel like it's still representative of how we expect content to be created these days, which is the making of is implicit in the actual release of the project. So to create an online following and to have like a discourse, you're often showing the creation of it in real time. And this was something that, and being informed by the audience as you're developing. There's this amazing little segment of David Bowie talking about this in like the 80s or 90s, when he's talking about how like the gap between artists creating something and then their audience, listening to it and engaging with it is shrinking, and that as that shrinks, that creates this dialogue, and there's this like new creative space that happens. And I think that is certainly something that vlogging and YouTubing and whatever kind of comes next from that embodies. And this was some of the most, before like cinematic was like a search term in YouTube and
Was
like
an
kind
hashtag,
of a meme.
yeah.
Yeah, this was that. This was very cinematic content on YouTube when that was still pretty novel.
I think, so I didn't know the channel, and I just watched the video you put on the doc. And what stand out to me and make it still relevant is, still a great video, even if it was probably shot with something we would never consider now. A setup. I don't know what it was shot on, but
I think he shoots with, or this was shot with the Canon Mark III,
nice.
Maybe Mark IV,
Yeah.
the 5D.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
not something I'd want to use.
But
Or no, excuse me. This is 1DX Mark II.
Yeah, that's what you can tell it's a little aged, but it's still great and it's still entertaining to watch. And I think one thing that I see that shifted from content like that is that instead of like all those travel videos, of cinematic travel videos, whatever you want to call it, instead of being about the travel and the location, the wonder of the travel and the adventure, it's become more often about the person that is awesome to travel. Like, look at my great life and I'm going there, and I don't know, like I feel that it's more interesting. Sure, I love to see that you're in Iceland or in I don't know where, and you're beautiful, and that's great. But I'm not gonna watch 10 videos of that. But if you give me a proposition of like discovering a location, a travel, an adventure through your eyes, the way you see it, I'm interested in that, and I'm gonna stick to it for sure.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I think, of course, maybe the reason you come is because they're reviewing a camera or something a little bit more searchable online. I forget exactly how I came across him in the first place, but I think it was something like that, a little more technical maybe. And then certainly the reason I followed him after that was because of the personality that he brought to it and the kind of the context and his own narrative that he brought around that. Interesting in kind of how things developed is I know that he more recently kind of like had a bit of trauma surrounding kind of like presenting this face outwardly to the internet. And I know that he's done a lot of kind of really much more personal, more out there content lately, that has turned a lot of his audience off. And I think, became, a very well-known influencer for this, and then struggled with the authenticity of experience and projecting to that kind of audience. And when it is you yourself that then becomes the product, essentially, what does that do for the soul inside of you? Yeah. And I think some people just gravitate towards a more, fake maybe, or just their personality lends itself towards like, I just project this facade maybe, and I don't even show the real me. But I think what made him kind of appealing in the first place was that he did seem to give you a more personal, raw take. But then I think when that comes with this influencer overhead, it can get really complicated. So it's a really interesting story to kind of see through time. When you're broadcasting yourself daily, he was on the daily vlog train for like a year or two. And after that, very consistently, that definitely does things to your head. And it seems like he's kind of come to terms with a lot of that and is doing his own thing now. So that's good, but also interesting just in the psychology of like what is this influencer thing that is maybe good, maybe not.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and I totally remember same watching videos similar to that I just don't remember who made them, and having that sort of feelings. Same thing like with snowboarding videos. Uh, Back maybe 10 or 15 years ago, same thing that I wanted to do the same. I wanted to document when we were going snowboarding and doing like those epic shots of just like getting the feelings and having the sound with it, and just like trying to transcript this emotion that you get in the moment of experiencing that. That's great to share. I still want to do it.
Yeah. What's next on your list?
On what got me started, so we limited ourselves to 3, so there is obviously way more. Of
course.
We can make way more, but yeah, I would say also anything that was made by Vice Media was also a great influence for me. I just thought it was cool, and it just circled back to documenting the stories that are not necessarily always told. And again, like now there is more of everything, so now I feel like it would not be the same thing, but at the time when you would find pieces of like content like that, it was the best, because like if you would turn on your options were very limited, so you didn't, outside of the mainstream content, it was hard to find stuff to relate to. And yeah, I remember when I find Vice, and then they started to make videos, and they have all kinds of short documentaries, and that would bring me back to when I was filming my friends. And same thing, that because I always loved both narrative and documentary, and I always wanted to do both, and I often go back and forth. Like sometimes I'm more inspired for a narrative short film or like a documentary piece. So yeah, that's my last one, but I don't have much to say about it. Beside that, I remember a particular one because Vice has a division in France too, so they make content in French, and yeah, I remember there were a series, a small documentary series, and it was this guy bored at home that would just take a plane ticket to the next flight, and it would go like. And I think it was called, I tried to find it, I had it on bookmarks, but they deleted the video. I think it was called Meet the Unexpected, and it would go to places, so let's say Japan, for example, and it was without speaking Japanese, and it would just go, try to interact with people, try to merge in the culture, and just trying to ask questions and trying to figure it out. And yeah, it was great. It was so different than what you would see usually, and yeah, I wanted to do the same. Yep.
I think we have really related picks here, because mine was it was a branded content from a creative agency here in Portland called Instrument. They do a lot of behind the scenes creative for Apple and Nike and Google. Really incredible team, and they do video as well, although these days they do more in the like digital content side of things, like web development and whatnot. But this is a whole genre in and of itself that we could go into. This is actually not YouTube, this is a Vimeo staff pick, and that is its own, like how many like Vimeo staff picks have like been launched careers, or people pursuing careers because they see, such a cool example. And, this was 6 years ago, which isn't that long ago, but in 2014, the world was a little bit of a different place. And I saw this, creative piece that was just exploring a place. This was the Pacific Northwest, and it was before I lived up here. And this was genuinely one of the reasons I moved to Portland, because I saw this video and I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. And it's funny because I watch this back now and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of just like any YouTuber could just go out and shoot this. But back then, I mean, the internet moves fast, man. Because
Yep.
back then, like this kind of thing was, I mean, it was a Vimeo staff pick. This was much harder feat to accomplish, publish, get people to see. Um, and I think it's exactly what you're saying. It was this kind of like, for me, what this showed was I was like, oh, marketing, because I knew this was a marketing agency. And the fact that they would fund this kind of content, that this could be a viable path for a creative professional where you could have a job, you don't have to be a starving artist. You could go and make things that actually speak to you. That's why I chose to go down the road of marketing and content marketing specifically, because I was like, yeah, I don't want to be starving. I don't want to always be scraping money together. I want to have a little bit of a security in my life, but at the same time, I want to do things that are creative, that motivate me. And this in particular was just like the combination of all those things. And yeah, it, to me now when I watch it, it feels so pedestrian, but it was just a revolution for me back then.
Yep. No, definitely. Every time I watch I mean, not every time, but and I don't watch everything. But often when I watch just stuff, still now, and on what keeps me still motivated, I would still put to these days any content that they produce, because they have multiple channel on this media too. They have ID, Motherboard, and on the same way Patagonia's YouTube channel, for the same reason, it still keeps me motivated. Those pieces of branded documentary where it's barely about the brand, it's there.
Yep.
It's definitely commercial, but
Yeah.
oriented, but it's not about that. It's about the subject, and it's those little stories. I don't know what is it, but I'm
Yeah.
still very passionate about it. And
Yeah.
yeah, commercially speaking, I mean, yeah, it's like you just said, you do need to make some money, and that is a great way to do it, definitely.
Yeah. Mike, what is Pony Smasher?
David Sandberg, have you ever heard of that guy?
I know David Sandberg, but I is
It's his
wait no.
YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. On what still keeps me motivated these days, this guy definitely. Yeah, David Sandberg is now an Hollywood director. He directed 3 movies now, and he started on making short films by himself. And what I love about him is that even after making movies, he still run his YouTube channel with his wife, and he still makes short film with his wife, which is very inspiring for me. And then he still takes the time to do like a tutorial or like a very basic video about filmmaking tools, and I love that. I love the simplicity of the guy. It's so inspiring, and that reminds me that no matter how high you can get, you can still love what you do. You can still be passionate and circle back to what's fun. Uh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think that for a while people saw YouTube, Vine, that like getting famous on those was then a step to, go make it on the big platforms, which was like TV or movies or something. And there are very few examples of that being successful. I mean, YouTube's own content creation, I forget what it's called, but like their own content that they produce with YouTube itself, not very successful. But I think that's such a cool. So I think this is an awesome example of like him retaining. He's like, no, I just do this, and I also make movies, and it's just like a combo.
It's so unreal too.
Yeah, I think of also like Will Smith, where it's like he is still an actor, but he's now like a YouTuber as well. He makes his own content and kind of like recognizing
with the difference that he does it with like still a big production behind him. It's like that other comedian, I forgot his name. Anyway, but it's still like very calculated. They are still very careful of their image and very self-conscious and everything. Where I mean, David Sandberg really doesn't care. He just, I mean, he does things right, and he's a great filmmaker. I don't know if you watch his stuff. I watched his two last short film just recently. I caught up because I didn't get notified for some reason. But anyway, and I watched the behind the scenes too, and I don't know, like he still does it just for the sake of it, just for fun.
Yeah, the other thing that it makes me think of is, of course, people would interview famous directors, or that they would have conversations. They'd talk in like niche or industry magazines, or at Sundance or something. You'd get like an interview with a director, but very few times would you actually see them create something that is not for the big scale, like the biggest scale. Like you don't get to see the home videos of Steven Spielberg or the lower budget things that a creator makes. And I think that's just such a cool thing to be able to see both, because I think then we're able to dream bigger, but also kind of like realize that you can have skills in multiple areas, and that one isn't necessarily better than the other.
Yeah, definitely. How about you? What keeps you motivated these days?
Well, definitely the work of Mumbo. He's kind of he's also someone who's doing two very different things at the same time. He got famous from his Minecraft channel called Mumbo Jumbo, which is like huge in the Minecraft world. And if you're not in the Minecraft world, which I'm not, but
I'm
I
not
came
either.
across his work. Yeah, but he's huge there. But then he launched his own channel, where it's more him directly, and he makes these amazing short film, doc style videos, kind of like what we've been talking about. But I feel like this kind of scale of storytelling is where I want to be and where I like to be, where it's a beautifully produced. It could be on a movie screen, but it's also small scale. The crew is, probably less than 5 people. He's telling smaller stories. He's developing a relationship with them. It doesn't become so encumbered by the production itself that the production becomes the only thing that you can be concerned about. He's able to be out there with a camera and kind of film things as they are, with a little bit of planning and care, of course. But I know from his behind the scenes that a lot of it is improvised. And for me, when I've gone above that scale, my interest level goes down, because it has to be so planned out that you only get the thing that you set out to get, which that's just not the kind of storytelling that I'm interested in. For me, I want to see the story evolving in front of me, and then be able to use the camera and the storytelling tools that we have to then capture and reproduce that. So that's what I love about Mumbo, is that, and also just the visual aesthetic, the actual just style that he shoots with is just awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I'll check some more. I watched just the one you mentioned. It was really cool, and so yeah, I'm gonna probably watch it all.
Yeah. What's your next pick?
Yeah, my next is I put basically almost everything that I watch on Short of the Week. I don't know if you follow them or if you get their newsletter. So it's people that was at Vimeo staff pick before, and they started this. So I don't know how you call it. If it's just a website or an agency, or I don't know.
I guess a blog, or I
Yeah,
don't
or
know.
blog. Yeah, and they basically do the same thing weekly, and they do a peak each week, and it's just awesome because it's a lot of very talented artists, and it's all short films, and so narrative and documentary, and there is some great pieces. I just watched last week the one called "The Prisoner's Song," and it was just great. It was a 10-minute ish drama piece in black and white about a prisoner's in and out of the prison, so a parallel that overlap the two timelines overlapping, and it was very contemplative. It was great. Every time I watch something from them, so I get their newsletter. They send one a week with their pick. And what's cool also with that website, so I've never done it yet, but you can submit your short for $25 and eventually get a pick. And there is a fair amount of people following it in the industry. So if you want to make connections and grow in that direction, I think it's a great way to do it. And you can also pay a little more, and I don't remember how much, but you can pay a little extra and get actual feedback. So that's cool too, if you need any. And yeah, so I highly recommend anybody that is interested in producing or working in the short content form to check it out. Non-commercial though, it's really just non-commercial. So yeah.
No, I was not aware of this. This is super cool, and I mean, I love the idea, and I love that they're basically kind of taking the idea of a Vimeo staff pick, but then developing that into its own channel. That's such a cool theme, especially it doesn't seem like Vimeo is quite as focused on that kind of editorial curation anymore.
Yeah.
So for them, taking this on is awesome. I also just really love that on their website they have the genre, the creator, and the length.
Yep.
Because I felt like a lot of what made me hesitant of jumping into, whatever video on Vimeo, I'd be like, oh, I don't really know what it's about or what type of video it is or how long it is. I don't really know what I'm getting into. And they make it really clear what kind of thing you're going to watch, so you can kind of pick what's interesting to you.
Yeah. And on each video, you get the little presentation, the little synopsis, and it's really well presented, and you have all kind of level of production in there too. It's great. It's just great. It's kind of like no matter what the level of production is, it's gonna be interesting content. So like it's almost like a label,
Yeah.
of like a stamp of the quality of the content. So that's why I love it.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I'm definitely going to be checking this out. Cool. Well,
I don't know if you still have one or two. I'm done, I think. But I think you still have a few, or a couple.
I'll just blast through mine. These are two creators on YouTube that certainly speak to me in the kind of creator that I, aspire to be, and am definitely influenced by in the style of video that they produce. They both, that is Tim Kelner and Kraig Adams, and they'll both be linked in the show notes, of course. Kraig Adams is they both have a sizable YouTube following. Kraig Adams has a much larger YouTube following. But Tim Kelner, he also makes all of the sound. So he does all of the music that he has that is like integral to his little vignettes. They're always really short. They're very emotional. They're very moody. They're sort of, I don't really see anybody doing exactly like him where certainly there are people creating little kind of montage style videos, but his are infused with a lot of different elements. It's not quite a music video, and it's not quite just like a B-roll sizzle reel. It's not quite a vlog. It's kind of a mix of all of those things. And the fact that he's able to do it with so much personal style is really inspirational to me. And then Kraig Adams, who kind of got me started on this like hiking train, the way that he is kind of able to he's developed like this little niche of these kind of silent hiking videos, and kind of what his videos did for me is, you don't have to make videos in this specific format. You don't have to go and hold the camera up in vlog style and talk into the camera and be overly animated and dramatic. You can just go and make the video that you want to make. And for him, that was like silent hiking videos. And there's no guarantee of success if you do that, of course, but it helped me break the mindset of I don't see myself as a YouTuber or someone who puts out content on the web, because I don't see myself as like this, very animated, dramatic, person.
Yeah.
It kind of gave me confidence in just go and do you, and see what happens as far as an audience goes, but you can still make something that you're proud of.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting the way he pivoted his channel, because he was originally doing wedding videography tutorials. I remember I was following him at the time, and he was very young too. And yeah, he slowly took this turn into doing more outdoor videos and travel and outdoor, and
Yeah.
it took him I think a second to figure out exactly his style, and yeah, it's great. I love it too.
Yeah, I think for a little while he was kind of doing it was like a mixture between like Casey Neistat and PewDiePie. He would have like the Casey Neistat style vlog mixed with like PewDiePie sense of humor. And I've heard him talk about both of these things too. So I think he's very well aware that he was, imitating that and kind of merging those. But it is really cool to see him kind of like, oh, this is like I fit in this space and this is how my style comes out. And I take inspiration from that in like, it's always a process, and you're not going to start out with the answer. So just go and make stuff that is authentic to you, that doesn't have to be styled in a certain way, and then it'll be worked out as you make more of it.
Yeah.
Mike, well, that was a lot of inspiration. I'm stoked to
Yeah,
go and
me
check
too.
out some more of this stuff. Yeah.
Definitely a great way, like we said at the beginning, to remind ourselves why we are doing this. And very interesting also to, I kind of want to watch everything you mentioned, so very interesting also to
Yeah, likewise.
exchange about it. Yeah, we should definitely follow up with maybe a subcategory, or could be like a period or a genre. Yeah. Definitely watch a lot of YouTube channels too, so I could definitely do only YouTube.
We definitely need to do a follow-up episode, and I also love how this is perfectly illustrative of like your short film influence and kind of my YouTube / web content influence. I think that's just funny to see kind of played out here.
Yep, definitely.
Well, let's get to recommendations. Mike, what is your recommendations for everybody to check out, other than, of course, everything that we just talked about?
Yeah, of course. This week I would recommend Darius Britt, or I hope I'm saying it right. Otherwise, excuse my accent. But yeah, his channel D4Darius, and he's so inspiring. He's a young filmmaker that did straight up of, if I remember, it was still at film school when he was trying to make his first feature film, and he documented everything on his channel. And in between, he doesn't do too much tutorials, but more like he's sharing his journey as a filmmaker. And just recently, I think one of his last video, if not the last one, was about the way he deals with project that fails, that get cancelled, and he has this workflow of having smaller ideas, smaller project in the back pocket that he just jump into if the big project fall apart for some reason, and that avoid any negative thoughts, and you that way you just keep going and you stay creative and you keep the ball rolling, because it is a struggle. And in this particular case, he was working on a pretty ambitious project, and I was following it. It was pretty. It was already started, did a lot of tests and everything, and just because of the quarantine, everything fell apart, and he had to to let it go. And it's just a very interesting fellow, and I love I love his channel. I love his content. It's very inspiring, and yep, great dude. How
Yeah,
about
no,
you?
I'm excited to. I've watched a few of his videos, and I'm excited to check out more because it does just look like so much, such a range, but all really, really helpful and interesting topics to dive into that are definitely outside of the just tech review side of things, which so many channels can veer into.
Yeah, and he's very focused into filmmaking, really,
Yeah.
in the purest form. But yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
yeah, speaking of filmmaking, I decided not to do a YouTube recommendation or anything like that for my recommendation. This is a film that influenced me deeply. It's Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. And he's just one of my favorite filmmakers of all time for sure. The easy or maybe the most straightforward pick would be Seven Samurai, which I think is a good
I
film.
think it's the
But
only one I've seen from him.
yeah, and that's why I'm recommending Yojimbo is because I love Seven Samurai, but I think Yojimbo actually speaks to me more. I think it's a little bit more of like a nuanced story. He's developed his style because it came out a few years after Seven Samurai. The production value went up a little bit. I love the black and white. I would never want to see, them changed. Although he did shoot in color later, of course, but just an incredible film. And the thing that I always think about when I think about Akira Kurosawa is that he was trained as a calligrapher, and so he would storyboard with like a brush and like these giant excuse me for hitting the mic, these giant scrolls, like these, kind of like, I mean, as if you were looking at a giant, scroll of the movie itself. And so
That's
when you
pretty
see
cool.
them, it's pretty amazing. And then you actually watch the films and they look like these paintings. Especially the way there's often shots where you can tell it's shot on a long lens, and it's a tracking shot that they're following action, and there's often all this stuff in between, and there's so much dynamism and action in these really, really simple shots, but he's able to pull so much emotion and kind of like just pure filmmaking energy out of that. Yeah, it definitely, they're slow paced films, they're films from the 50s and 60s, and later. So they do kind of, you do have to sit back a little bit and let the story unfold. They're not movies that are shot today, but there's so much beauty in them that highly recommend checking out.
Nice, I will for sure.
Cool.
All
Well, Mike,
right.
it's been a fun show. It's cool to hear more about your inspiration.
Yep, same. It was great. Yeah, we did great. It was a little shorter, probably better for viewers to keep it a little shorter. But yeah, there was great topic, and yeah, I don't know, I don't know what else to say, but
Yeah, well, definitely. If you have thoughts on any of the topics that we've talked about here, please drop them in the comments. We'd love to check them out. And if you have your own inspiration, either YouTube channels or films or anything like that, we'd genuinely love checking out what you all are inspired by. And other than that, we'll leave it to next week.
yep. See you next week, and have a great day.